The neon sign flickered above the rainy diner, casting a hazy red glow over the cracked asphalt parking lot. It was just past midnight in the dusty outskirts of Willow Creek, where the highway stretched like a forgotten vein into the night. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of sizzling grease and stale coffee, the kind of place where truckers nursed their regrets and locals whispered about better days. Behind the counter, 18-year-old Clara Jenkins wiped down the sticky formica, her apron stained from a 12-hour shift. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and her eyes, tired but sharp, scanned the empty booths. Tips had been slim tonight, barely enough to cover the bus fare home, but Clara had learned long ago to keep smiling through the ache in her feet. The bell above the door jingled, pulling her from her thoughts. A woman shuffled in, her coat threadbare and clutched tight around her like a shield. Trailing behind her was a boy, no more than 8, his face smudged with dirt and his sneakers dragging on the linoleum. The woman's hands trembled as she guided him to a booth, her voice a hushed murmur. "Just a little something, Tommy. Mama's got you." But Clara saw the worry etched deep in her lines, the way her fingers twisted the hem of her sleeve, the empty rattle of her purse when she reached for it later. They ordered simple, a burger for the boy, fries to share, and water all around. Clara nodded, punching it into the ancient register, but as she plated the food, she caught the woman's glance toward the door, as if calculating an escape. When the bill came, the woman slid a few crumpled dollars across the table, half of what was owed. "I'm sorry, honey," she whispered to the boy, who stared at his uneaten meal with wide, hollow eyes. "We'll make it up tomorrow." Tommy's lower lip quivered, but he didn't cry. He just pushed the plate away, the steam rising like a ghost between them. Clara's chest tightened. She thought of her own mom, gone 2 years now from the sickness that ate her from the inside, leaving Clara to scrape by on shifts like this. No safety net, no one to catch you when you fell. Without a word, she tore the ticket in half and slid it under the counter. "On the house tonight," she said softly, forcing a grin. "Kids gotta eat." The woman's eyes welled up, a quiet "God bless you" escaping her lips as she squeezed Clara's hand. Tommy looked up then, his small face breaking into a tentative smile, the first real one Clara had seen all night. She ruffled his hair, the warmth of the gesture chasing away the chill in her bones. It was just a meal, but in that moment it felt like defiance against the world's cruelty. Outside, the rumble of engines shattered the quiet. Headlights pierced the fog like searching eyes, and a convoy of motorcycles pulled into the lot. 20 strong, their chrome gleaming under the diner's lights. Leather vests patched with the emblem of the Iron Oath crew caught the neon's reflection, and the air filled with the sharp tang of exhaust and oiled metal. At the lead was Marcus Hale, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, his salt and pepper beard framing a face weathered by roads less traveled. He'd ridden with the Oath for decades, a brotherhood forged in the fires of old wars and older promises. Tonight they were just passing through, stopping for coffee after a long haul from the border towns. Marcus dismounted first, his boots crunching on gravel as he stretched his back. The others followed, a wall of quiet strength. Veterans like him, marked by scars that told stories they rarely shared. They filed into the diner, the bell jingling like an alarm, and claimed the counter stools. Clara poured their coffees black, her hands steady despite the sudden crowd. But Marcus's eyes lingered on the booth where the woman and boy had been. They were gone now, slipped out the back while Clara was distracted, leaving only the faint echo of gratitude. As the bikers talked in low tones about routes ahead, a brother down on his luck, Marcus sipped his coffee and watched Clara. She moved with a grace born of necessity, refilling mugs without complaint, her smile never faltering, even as fatigue pulled at her edges. One of the riders, a younger man named Riley with tattoos snaking up his arms, nodded toward her. tough kid, working alone like that." Marcus grunted in agreement, but his mind snagged on the torn ticket he'd glimpsed earlier, the way she'd covered for strangers without a second thought. The night wore on, the bikers nursing their drinks as rain began to patter against the windows. Clara tallied the register, her own pockets lighter now, but her heart a fraction fuller. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act, a burger and fries paid from her meager tips, had rippled outward like a stone in still water. Marcus leaned back, his calloused fingers drumming the counter. He'd seen enough broken promises in his life, oaths shattered in the heat of battle, families torn by distance and debt. But here was something pure, a quiet honor in the face of nothing. As the crew mounted up to leave, engines roaring back to life, Marcus caught Clara's eye. "You take care of yourself, miss," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. She nodded, waving them off into the storm. Dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the desert in shades of gold and shadow. Clara locked up the diner, the rain-slicked lot empty save for puddles reflecting the fading stars. She boarded the bus home, exhaustion settling in, unaware that the iron oath had etched her kindness into their ledger. Miles away, as the convoy thundered toward the next town, Marcus pulled over at a roadside stop. He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing in the early light. "Brothers," he said into the group call, his tone steady as steel. "We ride back tomorrow. Got a debt to settle. One good turn deserves another." In the heart of the oath's code, promises weren't just words. They were the chains that bound them, unbreakable even by time or tide. Clara's gesture had awakened something in Marcus, a reminder of the boy he'd once been, scraping by after losing his own father to the bottle and the bottle to the road. He'd vowed then to build a family from the lost, the loyal, the ones who kept their word. Now, as the sun climbed, he envisioned the return, not with fanfare, but with purpose. A gift, simple yet profound, to honor the girl who'd fed a hungry child when the world wouldn't. The bus jostled Clara awake as it hit a pothole, the city skyline blurring past. She touched the empty pocket where her tips had been, a small smile tugging at her lips. Little did she know, by noon the next day, the rumble would return, not as strangers but as kin. The iron oath didn't forget. And in Willow Creek, where hope often rode in on two wheels, a single meal was about to forge bonds that no storm could wash away. Word count, 872. The sun hung low over Willow Creek the next afternoon, turning the desert air into a shimmering haze that danced off the endless ribbon of highway. Clara Jenkins pushed through the diner's swinging doors, the familiar creak of the hinges greeting her like an old friend. Her shift started early today, the boss barking orders from the kitchen about the lunch rush. She tied her apron tight, the fabric still carrying a faint whiff of yesterday's rain, and glanced at the empty lot outside. No trace of the storm, just the relentless heat baking the asphalt into waves of distortion. She shook off the memory of the boy and his mother, chalking it up to one of those small victories that kept her going, tips or no tips. Inside, the diner hummed with its midday rhythm, the sizzle of burgers on the grill, the clink of silverware against plates, the low murmur of conversations from truckers hunched over their meals. Clara moved like a shadow between tables, refilling sodas and clearing dishes, her sneakers squeaking softly on the worn linoleum. Her mind wandered to the rent due at week's end, the stack of bills piling up on her cramped apartment counter. Mum's old locket dangled against her collarbone, a cool weight reminding her of tougher days. She'd survived those, she'd survived this too. A customer waved her over, his voice gruff but kind, and she flashed her practiced smile, the one that hid the weariness in her bones. Miles away, the Iron Oath convoy carved through the backroads, engines growling in unison like a pack of wolves on the hunt. Marcus Hale led the pack, his Harley vibrating beneath him as the wind whipped at his vest. The emblem, A forged iron ring, etched with an oath sworn under desert stars, flapped against his chest, a talisman against the world's betrayals. He'd called the brothers at dawn, his voice cutting through the static of their group line. We turn back. That girl's got heart. We owe her more than a nod. No questions asked. That's how the oath worked. Promises weren't debated, they were honored, etched into the road like tire tracks in mud. Riley rode shotgun beside him, his younger frame leaning into the curves, with the easy grace of someone who'd grown up on two wheels. Tattoos of faded dog tags peeked from under his sleeve, souvenirs from a deployment that had left him questioning more than just orders. "What's the play, Marcus?" he shouted over the roar, his eyes scanning the horizon. Marcus didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the fading mirage ahead. "We show up. Make it right. That kid she helped reminds me of my nephew, back when the mills shut down and we had nothing but pride." The convoy swelled now, 30 strong, then 40, riders peeling off from side routes like tributaries joining a river. Word had spread through the network, a debt of kindness, a stand for the overlooked. They carried no weapons, just the weight of their code. And in saddlebags, a collection pieced together from willing hands. As the diner came into view, the first scout bikes peeled ahead, their exhaust trailing like smoke signals. Clara was wiping down the counter when the ground began to tremble, a low rumble that built into a thunderous symphony. She froze, coffee pot in hand, as headlights flooded the windows, casting long shadows across the booths. The parking lot filled like a sudden storm, bikes lining up in precise rows, chrome glinting under the sun like polished armor. Leather creaked as riders dismounted, a sea of vests and weathered faces, but their movements were calm, purposeful. No revving engines for show, just the quiet click of kickstands. The bell jingled as Marcus stepped inside first, the door swinging wide behind him. The diner fell silent, forks pausing mid-air, eyes widening at the influx. Clara's heart skipped. She recognized him from last night, the salt and pepper beard and steady gaze. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice carrying the gravel of 1,000 miles. "Coffee for the crew?" She nodded, pouring with hands that betrayed a slight tremble, the aroma of fresh brew cutting through the tension. The bikers spread out, some at tables, others at the counter, their presence filling the space without overwhelming it. Whispers rippled among the locals. Fear at first, then curiosity as the riders ordered simple fare, pie slices, black coffee, nothing flashy. Marcus waited until the rush settled, then motioned Clara over. She approached cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "We came back," he said simply, pulling a worn envelope from his vest. Inside was cash, enough to cover a month's rent, crisp bills folded with care, and a small velvet box. "For what you did last night. That boy and his ma. They needed it. You gave without asking. The oath doesn't forget that." Clara's eyes widened, her throat tightening as she took the envelope, the paper crinkling under her fingers. It wasn't just money, it was acknowledgement, a bridge across the loneliness she'd carried since her mom's passing. But there was more. The box held a silver pendant, a miniature iron ring matching their emblem, engraved with a single word: oath. "Wear it if you want," Marcus continued, his eyes meeting hers with the weight of shared understanding. "Means you're family now, chosen, not born. If you ever need a ride, a hand, you call." Riley stepped up beside him, adding a nod. "We pulled it from the road. Brothers from here to the border. Your kindness? It woke something in us." Clara's vision blurred, not from tears, but from the rush of warmth flooding her chest. She'd always fought alone, scraping by on grit and memory. Now, these strangers, hardened by their own scars, offered a lifeline, woven from loyalty she'd only read about in faded storybooks. Outside, the convoy idled patiently, the sun dipping lower, casting golden halos around the bikes. The diner buzzed again, but softer now, laced with respect. A trucker raised his mug in quiet salute, and Clara slipped the pendant around her neck. The metal cool against her skin. It felt like a promise returned, a circle closing in the dusty heart of Willow Creek. As the bikers filed out, engines stirring to life, Marcus paused at the door. "Keep that light on for the lost ones," he said. "We'll be watching." The rumble faded into the distance, leaving Clara standing taller. The envelope heavy in her pocket, a gift that promised more than survival. It promised belonging. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The afternoon sun dipped behind the jagged hills, stretching shadows across Willow Creek like fingers reaching for forgotten secrets. Clara Jenkins stood, frozen in the diner's doorway, the silver pendant warm against her skin now, as if it had absorbed the heat of the moment. The envelope in her apron pocket crinkled with every breath, a tangible weight that grounded her amid the whirlwind. The rumble of the Iron Oath's engines had faded into a distant hum, leaving the parking lot eerily still, puddles from last night's rain evaporating into steam. She touched the iron ring engraving, tracing its edges with a fingertip scarred from too many hot plates. Family. The word echoed in her mind, foreign yet fitting, like a key turning in a long-locked door. Back inside, the diner settled into its post-rush lull, the air thick with the lingering scent of fried onions and cooling coffee. Clara busied herself restocking napkins, her movements mechanical as her thoughts raced. The money would cover rent, maybe even a few groceries, without the gnawing worry of overdrafts. But the pendant? That was something deeper, a thread connecting her solitary struggle to these road-worn strangers who'd seen her vulnerability and chosen to stand with it. She glanced at the booth where the boy and his mother had sat, the vinyl seat still indented faintly, as if holding their story. Had they made it home? The question tugged at her, a quiet ache amid the relief. As the clock ticked toward evening, the bell jingled again, not with the thunder of bikes, but the hesitant shuffle of feet. Clara looked up to see a man in a rumpled sheriff's uniform, his badge glinting dully under the fluorescent lights. Deputy Harlan Crow, a local fixture with a paunch straining his belt and eyes that lingered too long on the younger waitresses. He slid onto a stool at the counter, his boots leaving muddy prints on the floor. "Evening, Clara," he drawled, his voice oily as the grease trap she scrubbed nightly. "Heard there was some commotion here earlier. Bikers, was it? Filling up the lot like they owned the place." Clara poured his usual black coffee, keeping her expression neutral, the pendant tucked safely under her collar. "Just passing through, deputy." Ordered coffee, paid up, and left. No trouble. She set the mug down with a soft clink, steam curling between them like a veil. Harlan sipped, his gaze sharpening as he scanned the empty lot through the window. Rumors traveled fast in Willow Creek. Small towns thrived on them, twisting kindness into suspicion. "Heard they gave you something. Envelope, maybe?" You know the rules about that crowd. Iron Oath? They call themselves. Oaths or no, they're outsiders, and outsiders bring problems. Her pulse quickened, but Clara met his eyes steadily, the locket from her mom a cool anchor against her chest. Nothing like that, just tips for good service. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. The bikers had ordered, after all, but Harlan leaned in, his breath sour with tobacco, lowering his voice. "Listen, girl, your boss called me, said the register was short last night, and now this. Town's got eyes, folks like you, scraping by alone. One wrong move, and social services start asking questions about that apartment of yours. Permits, inspections. You don't want that headache." The threat hung in the air, subtle as a storm cloud gathering. Clara knew his type. Men who wielded badges like clubs, preying on the vulnerable under the guise of order. Her mum had dealt with the likes of him after the hospital bills piled up, fending off welfare checks that felt more like shakedowns. She swallowed the retort rising in her throat, nodding instead. "Understood, Deputy. Coffee's on me tonight." He grunted satisfaction, finishing his mug before tossing a coin on the counter, insult wrapped in charity, and lumbering out, his cruiser kicking up dust as it pulled away. Night fell heavy on the diner, the neon sign buzzing to life with its erratic flicker. Clara locked the front door at closing, the envelope transferred to her purse like a guarded secret. The bus ride home was a blur of sodium-lit streets and weary passengers, her mind replaying Harlan's words, problems, as if kindness was a crime in a place where corruption wore a uniform. She stepped into her dim apartment, the air stale with solitude, and emptied the bills onto the kitchen table, crisp, unyielding proof of unexpected grace. But as she fastened the pendant openly now, its weight a quiet vow, doubt crept in. What if the oath's return had painted a target on her back? Willow Creek didn't take kindly to those who stepped outside the lines. Miles away, under a canopy of stars that pierced the desert sky like bullet holes, Marcus Hale nursed a beer at a roadside campfire. The iron oath had scattered for the night, bikes parked in a loose circle around the flickering flames, the scent of mesquite smoke mingling with engine oil. Riley sat across from him, sharpening a knife with rhythmic scrapes, the blade catching firelight. "That deputy sniffing around?" he asked, his voice low. Marcus nodded, staring into the embers. "Word from our scout. Man's got a reputation, shakes down the little guys. Pockets the take. That girl's caught in his web now, thanks to us showing up bold." The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like unresolved ghosts. Marcus thought of his own past, the promise he'd made to a fallen brother in the sands overseas. Protect the innocent, honor the overlooked. The oath wasn't about flash, it was the steady burn of loyalty, the kind that outlasted badges and borders. "We don't back off," he said finally, his voice resolute. "Tomorrow we dig. Find out what that deputy's hiding. Clara's one of us now. Chosen. We ride for her, quiet but sure." Nods rippled through the group, a silent pact sealed in the night's hush. Riders like Javier, a former medic with hands steady from stitching wounds in forgotten wars, and Lena, the only woman in the core crew, her scars from a rough upbringing hidden under ink and leather, leaned in. "Family first," Lena murmured, her eyes fierce. Back in Willow Creek, Clara lay awake in the dark, the pendant glowing faintly on her nightstand. Sleep evaded her, replaced by a fragile hope intertwined with fear. The gift from the oath had mended a tear in her world, but now cracks were forming elsewhere, Harlan's shadow looming larger. She didn't know it yet, but the rumble would return, not as a fleeting visit, but as a shield against the gathering storm. In the quiet hours, promises whispered across the miles, binding the lost to the loyal. Dawn would bring choices, tests of the heart that no amount of chrome or cash could buy. And in the heart of it all, a teen waitress stood at the edge, ready to claim the family she'd never known she deserved. The first light of dawn sliced through the blinds of Clara Jenkins's apartment like a hesitant blade, painting stripes across the cluttered kitchen table where the envelope lay open, its contents untouched since the night before. She hadn't slept much. The silver pendant clutched in her fist like a talisman against the shadows Deputy Harlan had cast. The air was thick with the scent of yesterday's coffee grounds and the faint metallic tang of fear sweat dried on her skin. Clara rose, her bare feet cold on the linoleum, and splashed water on her face from the sink, the faucet groaning in protest. Outside, Willow Creek stirred awake, distant horns from the highway, the low buzz of a neighbor's radio filtering through thin walls. She fastened the pendant under her shirt, its weight a secret anchor, and headed out, the bus rumbling to life under a sky bruised with clouds. At the diner, the morning shift dragged like a slow bleed, the grill's sizzle a constant underscore to her racing thoughts. Clara poured endless cups of joe for early risers, farmers with calloused hands, mechanics wiping grease from their brows, their chatter a murmur about crop yields and engine troubles. But her eyes kept flicking to the windows, half expecting Harlan's cruiser to prowl the lot again. The boss, a wiry man named Earl with a perpetual scowl, barked from the kitchen, "Pick up the pace, Jenkins! Lunch crowd's coming." She nodded absently, wiping down a booth, the vinyl sticky under her rag. The pendant shifted against her collarbone, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone anymore. Yet doubt gnawed at her. What if the oath's gift had only invited trouble, turning her quiet survival into a spotlight she couldn't afford? Miles out on the sun-baked fringes of town, Marcus Hale gathered his crew at a dusty pull-off, the convoy's bikes forming a steel semicircle against the horizon. The desert wind carried the sharp bite of sagebrush and hot rubber, whipping at their vests as they dismounted. Riley handed out maps scribbled with notes from overnight calls, contacts in the network, old favors called in. "Harlan Crow's got skeletons," Riley said, his voice low over the idling engines. "Shakedowns at the diner, favors for the mill owner who skipped town last year. Folks whisper about missing tips, families pressured to leave." Marcus nodded, his salt and pepper beard catching the light as he scanned a faded photo pulled from a saddlebag. Harlan in younger days, arm around a crooked judge at some local fair. The oath's code burned in him like engine heat. Expose the rot, protect the pure. No guns, no threats. Just truth, carved out like a vein of ore. They split into pairs, scouts fanning out like shadows on the wind-scarred roads. Javier, the former medic with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing, rode with Lena toward the county records office in the next town over. Her bike hummed beside his, leather creaking as she leaned into the throttle. "This deputy's poison," she muttered, her voice edged with the fire of her own past, nights dodging enforcers in a city that chewed up dreamers. Javier glanced her way, the wind tugging at his graying hair. "We get proof. We hand it clean. Oaths about justice, not vengeance." Their tires kicked up red dust, the landscape blurring into a tapestry of cacti and cracked earth, each mile a step toward unveiling the corruption that festered in Willow Creek's underbelly. Back at the diner, the lunch rush hit like a wave, plates clattering as Clara balanced trays with practiced efficiency. A family slid into the booth by the window, Mom, Dad, 2 kids with sticky fingers, and she took their order with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As she plated their meals, the bell jingled sharply and Harlan strode in again, his uniform rumpled, badge catching the light like a false promise. He claimed his stool, eyes locking on her immediately. "Busy today, Clara. Good. Means you're keeping things above board." She poured his coffee, steam rising in lazy curls, her pulse a steady drum. "Always do, deputy." But he leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial rasp. "That biker bunch. Saw 'em circling town edges. You talk to anyone? Friends in low places?" The question hung like smoke, and Clara felt the pendant heat against her skin, as if warning her. She thought of the boy's hollow eyes from 2 nights ago, the mother's trembling hands, echoes of her own losses, the mum who'd fought alone until the end. "Just customers," she replied evenly, turning to the grill to hide the flush in her cheeks. Harlan chuckled, low and mean, stirring sugar into his mug with deliberate slowness. "Smart girl. But if they come sniffing around again, you tell me. Town's got rules. Protect the likes of you from complications." His gaze lingered on her apron pocket, where the envelope's ghost resided, and she busied herself with orders, the diner's hum a fragile shield. As the afternoon waned, the first ripples of the oath's probe reached the diner like whispers on the wind. A regular old Tim from the gas station down the road slid Clara a tip with a folded note. Heard about the deputy. Keep your head down. Friends watching. Her heart stuttered. The network was alive, invisible threads weaving protection. But Harlan noticed the exchange, his eyes narrowing as Tim shuffled out. "What's that?" he demanded, rising halfway from his stool. Clara pocketed the note, meeting his stare with the quiet steel she'd forged from grief. "Nothing you need worry about." He hovered a moment longer, the air thick with unspoken threats, then tossed bills on the counter and left, the door slamming like a judgment. Outside, the sun dipped toward the hills, casting long shadows that stretched like accusations across the lot. Clara stepped out for a breath, the heat pressing down like a hand on her shoulder. In the distance, a lone bike engine purred. Riley, scouting from afar, his silhouette a dark promise against the fading light. He didn't approach, just nodded once, the gesture carrying the weight of the oath's vow. Back inside, as she cleared the last tables, Clara felt the shift. Fear mingling with resolve, the pendant no longer a secret but a badge. Harlan's web was tightening, but the biker's loyalty was a counterforce, gathering like thunder on the horizon. That evening, as the crew reconvened at the campfire's edge, Marcus pored over the gathered intel. Receipts of skimmed fines, witness accounts buried in files. Javier laid out photos. Harlan pocketing cash from a scared shopkeeper, the flash frozen in time. "Enough to tip the scales," Javier said, the firelight etching lines deeper into his face. Lena crossed her arms, staring into the flames. "Clara's holding the line, but if he pushes harder—" Marcus silenced them with a raised hand, his voice steady as the desert night. "We ride at first light. Confront him on his terms. Truth to power. For her, for the boy, for every promise we've kept." The group murmured agreement, the crackle of wood underscoring their bond. A family forged in motion, unbreakable. In her apartment, Clara finally slept, the note from Tim tucked beside the pendant. Dreams wove through her mind, engines roaring like guardians, a convoy shielding the lost. Dawn would bring Harlan's next move, a test of wills in the heart of Willow Creek. But with the oath's shadow at her back, she rose not as a lone waitress, but as one claimed by loyalty's unyielding grip. The moral storm brewed, justice's quiet thunder rolling in, ready to wash clean the corruption that dared touch the innocent. If this story of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds has touched you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of honor to those who need them most. The morning air in Willow Creek carried a chill that seeped through the cracks of the diner's walls, mingling with the rich aroma of percolating coffee and the faint, earthy scent of dew-kissed asphalt. Clara Jenkins arrived early, her sneakers crunching over scattered gravel as she unlocked the side door, the key turning with a familiar click. The pendant hung heavy under her shirt, a constant companion now, its iron ring engraving pressing against her skin like a whispered vow. Sleep had come in fits, haunted by Harlan's oily gaze and the note from Tim now folded in her pocket like a fragile shield. She flipped on the lights, the fluorescents humming to life, casting stark pools over the empty booths. Today felt different, charged, as if the town itself held its breath. Inside, she prepped for the breakfast crowd, stacking plates with mechanical precision, her mind replaying the oath's quiet nod from Riley the evening before. Family. The word still felt like borrowed armor, too large for her frame, but impossible to shed. The boss, Earl, shuffled in from the back, his cough rattling like loose engine parts. "Heard the deputy's been poking around," he grumbled, tying his apron without looking at her. "Keep it clean, Jenkins. No drama." Clara nodded, pouring batter onto the griddle, the sizzle a brief distraction from the knot in her stomach. Drama. As if surviving on tips and memories wasn't drama enough. She glanced out the window, the highway stretching empty under a sky heavy with unshed rain, and wondered if the bikers' shadows would appear before Harlan's cruiser did. Farther out, where the desert met the ragged edges of town, the Iron Oath assembled in the lee of a weathered barn, their bikes lined up like sentinels against the wind-whipped scrub. Marcus Hale stood at the center, unfolding a dog-eared map on the hood of an old pickup, the paper fluttering in the breeze that smelled of dry sage and distant thunder. Around him the crew, now 50 strong, riders converging from side roads like veins feeding a heart, leaned in, faces etched with the quiet determination of those who'd stared down worse than a crooked badge. Javier spread out the photos again, the images stark under the rising sun. Harlan's hand slipping into a pocket during a routine check, a family's fearful faces blurred in the background. Witnesses lining up, Javier said, his voice steady, hands scarred from years of mending the broken. Gas station owner, a nurse from the clinic, all say the same. He squeezes the vulnerable, buries the complaints. Lena paced nearby, her boots kicking up puffs of dust, the leather of her vest creaking softly. Her eyes, sharp as flint, scanned the group. Clara's in the crosshairs because of us. We move smart. Get this to the right ears, the state boys who don't bend. Marcus traced a route on the map with a calloused finger, his beard shadowing a jaw set like granite. The oath's promise burned in him, a fire kindled long ago on blood-soaked sands, where he'd sworn to shield the overlooked from men like Harlan. No confrontation yet, he rumbled, meeting each gaze. We build the case airtight, ride in pairs, talk to the folks he's hurt, for her, for the code. Nods rippled through the assembly, engines coughing to life as they dispersed. The convoy fracturing into purposeful streams that vanished into the haze. Back at the diner, the breakfast rush swelled like a tide, filling the air with the clatter of forks and the murmur of small talk. Clara wove through the tables, balancing trays laden with eggs and toast, her smile a practiced veil over the tension coiling in her chest. A group of locals, farmers with dirt under their nails, chatted about the weather, but their eyes flicked to her with unspoken questions, the town's grapevine alive with whispers of bikers and badges. She refilled a mug for old Tim, who slipped her another note under his saucer. They're coming, hold steady. Her fingers brushed the paper, heart quickening as she pocketed it. Steady. Easier said than done when every shadow seemed to carry Harlan's weight. The bell jingled mid-morning, and there he was. Deputy Harlan Crowe, striding in with the swagger of a man who owned the cracks in the system. His uniform hung loose today, eyes bloodshot from whatever chased him through the night. He claimed the end stool, the one with the best view of the register, and drummed his fingers on the counter, the rhythm echoing like a warning. Morning, Clara. Coffee, and make it strong. She poured without a word, the steam rising in thin veils that blurred his face for a merciful second. He sipped, then set the mug down hard enough to slosh. Busy night thinking about our chat. Those bikers, they ain't just passers-by. Got word they're asking questions round town. About me. His voice dropped, laced with a venom that turned her stomach. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Clara's grip tightened on the coffee pot, the handle warm against her palm. She thought of the boy's tentative smile, the mother's grateful squeeze, moments that had cost her nothing but gained her everything. Like I said, deputy, just customers. But Harlan leaned in, his breath a sour cloud, eyes boring into hers. Customers don't pool cash for strays, don't mark girls with their junk jewelry. He nodded toward her collar, where the pendant's chain peeked out. Panic flickered, but she straightened, the iron ring's weight fueling a spark of defiance. It's just a necklace. From a friend. The word hung between them, bold and unyielding, a line drawn in the diner's greasy air. Harlan's laugh was short, bark-like, but his eyes narrowed, calculating. Friends like that get folks in trouble. Lost jobs worse. Your boss, Earl, he's got debts. One word from me and that apartment of yours, inspected top to bottom. You play smart girl or the whole house comes down. He slid a few coins across the counter, more show than payment, and rose, his chair scraping like nails on chalkboard. The door swung shut behind him, leaving the diner quieter, the locals averting their gazes as if ashamed. Clara exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter, the notes from Tim burning in her pocket like embers. Harlan's threats were tightening like a noose, but the oath's invisible web was spreading, threads of truth pulling against his lies. As noon approached, the first signs of the biker's work filtered in, a phone call to the diner from an unknown number, Earl answering gruffly before hanging up with a puzzled frown. Some reporter from the city asking about fines and such. Clara's pulse raced. The case was building, voices rising from the silenced. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds rolling in like gathering allies. She stepped into the lot for air, the wind tugging at her hair, carrying the faint, distant growl of engines. Scouts circling, watchful. Riley's bike idled at the road's edge, a silhouette against the gathering storm, his nod a silent assurance. We're here. In the afternoon's heavy hush, Marcus received the call at their outpost, Javier's voice crackling over the line. Got it solid. Deputy's ledger, hidden payoffs, witnesses ready to sign. Marcus pocketed the phone, staring at the horizon where Willow Creek lay vulnerable. The oath's ride was no longer just a gift. It was a reckoning, justice served not with fists, but with the unyielding light of exposure. Prepare the convoy. He ordered the nearest riders, his tone forged in the fires of old oaths. We end this tomorrow. For the girl who fed the hungry, we clear the path. Clara closed the diner that evening to a sky-spitting rain, the drops pattering like impatient fingers. Harlan's shadow lingered, but so did the pendant's promise, a chosen family, loyal and true, rolling toward her like thunder on the wind. Night fell, thick with anticipation, the moral scales tipping in the quiet hours before dawn. In Willow Creek's weary heart, redemption stirred, ready to claim its due. The rain came down in sheets as dawn broke over Willow Creek, turning the highway into a slick mirror that reflected the bruised sky. Clara Jenkins huddled under the diner's awning, her apron damp from the dash inside. The pendant's chain chilled against her collarbone. The lot was a shallow lake now, puddles rippling with each fat drop that hammered the roof like impatient drums. She'd arrived before the shift, the boss's truck absent, leaving the place to her and the ghosts of yesterday's threats. Harlan's words echoed in her ears, house coming down, but so did the notes from Tim, the distant rumble of engines that promised more than isolation. She unlocked the door, the bell's jingle swallowed by the storm, and flipped the sign to open. The neon's buzz, a defiant spark in the grey. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying the faint, comforting scent of yesterday's bacon grease, and fresh grounds she brewed strong. Clara busied herself wiping counters, her movements deliberate to steady the tremor in her hands. The pendant felt heavier today, a badge of belonging she'd earned through a simple act, a meal for a hungry boy, paid from her own threadbare pockets, family chosen. The thought warmed her against the chill seeping through the windows, but fear lingered like fog. Harlan's cruiser had patrolled late last night, lights flashing past her apartment window, a silent warning. What if his squeeze tightened before the bikers could act? She glanced at the clock, its hands crawling toward opening, and whispered to the empty room, "Hold on." Out on the desert's edge, where the storm lashed the scrub like a whip, the iron oath gathered under a makeshift tarp, strung between bikes and a rusted fence. Water streamed off of leather vests, pooling around booted feet, but their faces were set, unyielding as the iron in their emblem. Marcus Hale stood at the fore, rain tracing rivulets down his beard, the map now sodden but memorized. 50 riders strong, They'd swelled overnight. Word of the deputies' rot pulling in brothers from distant chapters, their engines silenced for now. Saddlebags heavy with documents and recordings. Javier handed Marcus a sealed folder, its edges curling in the wet. Affidavits from the gas station owner, the nurse, even Earl, who'd grumbled but signed after a late-night visit. "It's ironclad," Javier said, rain dripping from his brow. "State investigators en route. Anonymous tip. Harlan's done." Lena revved her bike once. The growl cutting through the downpour like a challenge, her eyes fierce under the hood of her jacket. "Clara's waiting. We ride in clean. Hand this off. Watch him squirm." Marcus nodded, his voice gravel over thunder. "No heroes today, just the oath. We protect our own, expose the poison, for the girl who kept her word when it cost her." The convoy stirred, headlights piercing the veil of rain like lances, tires hissing on wet gravel as they formed up. The air smelled of wet earth and exhaust, a potent mix that fueled their resolve. Promises weren't broken in storms, they were forged in them. Engines roared to life in unison, a thunder that rivaled the sky's fury, and they surged toward town, a wall of loyalty rolling through the deluge. At the diner, the morning crowd trickled in despite the weather. Truckers shaking off coats, their boots tracking mud across the linoleum. Clara poured coffees with steady hands, the steam a brief warmth in the chill, her smile masking the knot of anticipation. The bell jingled amid the patter, and her heart leaped as Marcus entered first, water sheeting off his broad frame. Behind him, the lot filled impossibly with bikes, riders filing in orderly, claiming booths without a word, their presence a quiet fortress. Harlan was there already, at his stool, mug half empty, his eyes widening at the influx. "What the hell is this?" he barked, rising, hand twitching toward his belt. Marcus approached the counter, folder in hand, rain dripping from his sleeve onto the formica. "Morning, deputy. We're here for a chat." The diner hushed, forks pausing, eyes locked on the standoff. Clara froze behind the register, the pendant burning like a brand. Harlan's face reddened, bluster rising. "You outsiders got no business. Get out before I call backup." But Marcus slid the folder across, its contents spilling slightly. Photos, statements, a recorded clip of Harlan's voice demanding protection money from a trembling shopkeeper. "We know about the fines you skim, the families you run off. The state's coming. Sign the resignation or it all goes public. Your choice." The air thickened, rain hammering the roof like a verdict. Harlan snatched a page, his hands shaking, the color draining from his face as recognition dawned. Whispers rippled from the booths, Tim nodding grimly, a trucker muttering, "About time." Clara stepped forward, voice soft but clear. "You threatened the wrong people, deputy. Some debts get paid in truth." Harlan's eyes darted to her, then the biker's unyielding stares, the weight of exposure crushing his swagger. He crumpled the paper, shoulders slumping. "This ain't over," he snarled. But it was. Empty, defeated, he stormed out into the rain, cruiser peeling away in a spray of water, leaving silence in his wake. The diner exhaled as one, the storm easing to a drizzle outside. Marcus turned to Clara, his gaze kind under the weathered lines. "It's done. You held the line, proud of you, kin." She nodded, tears mixing with the relief flooding her chest. The pendant now light as hope. The riders raised mugs in quiet toast, the aroma of fresh pie joining the coffee's warmth. Earl emerged from the kitchen, grunting approval, the register's till suddenly fuller with their orders. Outside, the convoy idled, rain washing clean the lot, chrome gleaming anew. As the sun broke through, painting the wet world in hesitant gold, Clara locked eyes with Marcus one last time. "Thank you for seeing me." He clasped her shoulder, the gesture paternal, forged in shared scars. "Oath's family. Ride with us any time." The engines rumbled farewell, fading into the highway's embrace, leaving Willow Creek lighter, its shadows lifted. Clara touched the pendant, the iron ring a legacy of quiet courage. The meal that started it all, the promise that bound them. In the diner's heart, redemption had arrived not with fanfare, but with the steady honor of those who chose loyalty over letting go. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of kindness repaid and justice found. If stories of chosen family and unbreakable promises move you, subscribe now. We'll keep the road open for more.